1980.
Phyllis, stay there. This is so important, folks. What one lady did with a book, changing history, you could change history too. Stay with.
We're on the march. The empire's on the run. Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
Aging starts at the cellular level. When cells become toxic, they die early and aging sets in. In the past decade, we have witnessed unparalleled scientific discoveries. During that period, key patented compounds have focused on mitochondrial growth, nerve growth, and rejuvenation. But no one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. We now have the synergistic solution, DNA Force, just one of the key compounds. BioPQQ is backed by major clinical studies and over 175 PubMed-listed published studies. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? The ultimate value, cutting-edge, trailblazing game changer that also supports the InfoWar. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139. DNA Force from InfoWars Life. On the eve of Thanksgiving this year, I was thinking, what am I really thankful for? And I got to tell you, it's my family, it's all the blessings of liberty that our forebears secured, and it's you, the listeners of the broadcast, who've made everything we do possible. This Black Friday, I decided to bring you the biggest special we've ever offered on any of the nutraceuticals at InfoWarsLife.com. I'm talking about Silver Bullet Colloidal Silver that we've been sold out of for months. This time I doubled down and got even more. As of me taping this on the eve of Thanksgiving, we have already sold half of it. So instead of keeping the price at its regular discounted price, we are going to give you 20% off and free shipping on single bottles. But if you get 4 bottles, we're going to give you the 5th one free and the free shipping. I don't know how long this special will run, but if supplies last, we will extend it out until Cyber Monday. You'll find powerful nutraceuticals like Silver Bullet and others at InfoWarsLife.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139. Again, this is Alex Jones wishing you all a blessed and happy Thanksgiving and thanking you all for your support of freedom.
Another major health threat, this one in Toledo, Ohio, where everybody in the entire city has been told not to drink the water.
Ohio's governor declaring a state of emergency.
Did you know that the average person uses about 80 to 100 gallons of water at home every single day? If there's a water emergency, will you be prepared?
Panicked residents forming long lines throughout the day.
We're here at a supermarket in Toledo. You can see the shelves empty where water once was.
To stay safe and healthy during a crisis, you must have access to safe, clean water. Water which will not be available at your local grocery store.
There's a mad dash on right now to stock up on supplies.
The ProPure Pro 1 G2.0 water filtration system is a must-have for every modern, independently minded household. Protect your family's safety during an emergency. Go to InfoWarsStore.com today to purchase your ProPure Pro 1 G2.0 water filtration system or call 1-888-253-3139.
A frontal assault on the lies of the New World Order. It's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
It was Barry Goldwater who almost became president, but they ran TV ads saying there'd be nuclear war, we'd all die if he got elected. The Trilateralist Commission is international and is intended to be the vehicle for the multinational consolidation of the commercial and banking interest by seizing control of the political government of the United States. The Trilateralist Commission represents a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the 4 centers of power: political, monetary, intellectual, and ecclesiastical. They've got most of the churches. They've got things by the Federal Reserve. They've got the Democratic Party and most of the Republicans. They've taken control of the universities. That's from his book, from U.S. Senator from Arizona, Barry Goldwater, with no apologies. And I know folks that knew Barry Goldwater, just, and of course, Phyllis Schlafly knew him well. What a great guy. How wonderful it would have been to have him as president. Reagan had great rhetoric about how, you know, you did build your business and freedom's great and everything else. Politics got away from him in the Congress and some bad things happened. some things I disagree with under Reagan, and Ron Paul criticized those as well. But compare Ronald Reagan to Obama, who says you didn't build your business, and Hillary came out and said businesses don't hire people. There's a war against reality. We're going to talk to her and walk through this new edition of her book because it's very exciting, and I want to hear some of these stories. Then we're going to open the phones up for your quick question or comment, whether you agree, disagree, whatever, for Phyllis Schlafly. The toll-free number to join us on this live Monday edition is 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. Questions or comments for Phyllis Schlafly. Again, I'm your host, Alex Jones. Before we go any further, we've got a whole bunch of new shirts made in America. The fabric, they're printed in America. Everything, the cotton's grown in America, have come in at madein1776.com. Now, I'm wearing right now one of the first that came out last year when we launched the Made in 1776 line. But this is the Join or Die shirt, one of my favorites. But we've got some of the new ones in the camo, Molon Labe, and others. And we've got the 50 caliber 1776 bottle breachers that just won Shark Tank last week. We're going to get those one of those Navy SEALs that owns the company on in the next few days. And the point is, we know stuff that's interesting. We've got some new belt buckles coming in that are Molon Labe that'll sell out quickly, that are made in America. And all of this funds the InfoWars operation. We're not like MSNBC. They got stimulus money, or NPR, that gets $400 million of taxpayer money every year. We are funded by folks buying the great products at InfoWarsStore.com or Madein1776.com or the great supplements at InfoWarsLife.com. Now, InfoWarsStore.com takes you to a directory of all those sites and shopping carts. It's basically like a whole shopping center right there. But when you buy the products from us, it funds the operation. You're shopping with the good guys. On top of it, the proprietary supplements like DNA Force, Survival Shield, X2, Oxy Powder, all of it is proprietary to the site and to our developer, Dr. Group. And you've heard the incredible reviews out there. So InfoWarsLife.com. And here's the good news. The products are very popular. Here's the bad news. We are about to sell out of Survival Shield. We are about to sell out of Lung Cleanse. We are about to sell out of DNA Force, Oxy Powder, Super Male Vitality, basically everything. Rydes, more colloidal silver set to come in next week. And Rydes, one of our new products, is set to come in next week. We actually have some of it in, but not enough to even offer it. So if you want any of these products, InfoWarsLife.com. Also recommend the great longevity line of products discounted at InfoWarsHealth.com. The Beyond Tangy Tangerine, the Pollen Burst, just the Alex Pack, all of it at InfoWarsHealth.com. You can find links there at InfoWarsStore.com as well, or 888-253-3139. You can call, ask about any specials, and our great crew will answer your questions. I want to thank you all for your support. Going back to Phyllis Schlafly, of course, of the Eagle Forum. Phyllis, talk about some of the history. Talk about Barry Goldwater. Talk about the new edition of your book and why it's so important for people to get it.
Well, when I brought out A Choice Not an Echo, it had this enormous sale. And what it did was to inspire people to believe that the grassroots could win against the establishment and nominate a real conservative. Now, let me remind you that in that time period, presidents were supposed to come from New York, Pennsylvania, or Ohio. And Barry Goldwater was from Arizona. I didn't know anybody who had ever been to Arizona. There was no baseball team that was farther west or south than St. Louis. It was so far away and so distant, and yet we picked him, and we made speeches for him. I made speeches all over the country for him, and it did get him nominated. Of course, they clobbered him in the election, but we stayed together as the grassroots conservative. And then came Ronald Reagan, and we got him elected, and he had two wonderful presidencies, not perfect, but certainly better than anything the Democrats had to offer. And then they kind of disintegrated after that, and we had people who pretended to be conservatives who really weren't. And we've got to revive them. And that's why I come out with my 50th anniversary edition of A Choice Not an Echo. Now, it's not a rewrite of the original. The original's in there just as I wrote it in '64. But what I do is to bring it up to date. with the shenanigans and the behind the closed door deals that were made in all the Republican National Conventions after 1964. Brings it right up to date. And I'm telling listeners, you can't be a player in the presidential election next year unless you know the history, unless you know what's in the past. Because we want to pick somebody who's picked by the grassroots. We don't want somebody who wants to bring in all this cheap labor and export our good jobs abroad to cheap labor countries. And so it's a big challenge, but you need to know the history in order to get going in the battle.
I agree. Phyllis, the founder of the Eagle Forum, Phyllis Schlafly's our guest. I want to bring up some inside baseball stories here. I've been told by high-level folks that at the nomination process for the 1980 election, and I've seen the speeches and seen video clips where Ronald Reagan was criticizing George Herbert Walker Bush and saying he's a trilateralist, he's a globalist, basically going with a Barry Goldwater line of reality, and that he was taken behind closed doors and said, we're not going to back you if you don't put Bush in here, who was a Rockefeller East Coast Republican. And then you have the Clinton dynasty and the Bushes working together. I was always told at the time that Bush had basically fallen down on the election so Clinton could get in. Now they call him another son. That's basically been admitted. Now we're back to more Clinton and Bush dynasties.
Well, let me say, Alex, the story of what they tried to do to Reagan when they realized he was going to be nominated is told in my new book, A Choice Not an Echo, and it's quite a behind-the-scenes story. What they tried to do was to make Gerald Ford co-president. And when Dan Rather accosted me on the floor of the convention, he said, what do you think about this, Mrs. Schlafly? And I said, well, it's completely unconstitutional. You want to give the vice president control of the budget, the money, our sovereignty issues, our tax issues, and leave President Reagan with nothing but the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
Well, let's stop right there, because this is such a big deal. You're confirming what I was told when I was, a kid, and then when I've talked to high-level Republicans that were there. You were there on record on national television. You were behind the scenes. The establishment was so afraid of Reagan that they were trying to get him to agree to be a titular head and try to change the Constitution illegally inside the party. Break down exactly what happened. It's sensational.
Well, tell a story in my new edition of A Choice Not an Echo. But they wanted to give all the real power to the vice president, who would be Gerald Ford. And the reason they wanted Gerald Ford was that he was a man who took his orders from Henry Kissinger. And they thought that would enable them to run the country even if Reagan were elected president. And that is why Reagan was pounded so heavily by them that he called George Bush at 11:25 that night, and I was there in the convention hall, at 11:25 and said, get on over here. Bush was already in his pajamas. He had given up any hope of being on the ticket. And Reagan brought him over and introduced Bush because he was afraid he couldn't get through the night. Walter Cronkite from his skybox had already announced that Gerald Ford was going to be the co-president and have the real power.
So the elites were just struggling to get their people in, and so George Herbert Walker Bush was seen as a better person for him to choose than Gerald Ford.
Oh, yeah. Bush, sure. But the first George Bush was the choice of the establishment, no question about that, and the grassroots were for Ronald Reagan. And then we had enough delegates to nominate Reagan, but the establishment, the so-called kingmakers, cooked up this deal by which they thought they could take the power away from the president and give it to a vice president they could control.
It's amazing, though. So we learned that Ronald Reagan really was anti-New World Order, anti-globalist.
Sure.
But then he gets shot. And then he goes in for treatment and comes back out. I know you were in both administrations. What can you say about what happened inside of those administrations?
Well, Reagan wasn't perfect, but he certainly was better than anybody else in sight. And he was the choice of the grassroots, and he did not turn over all his power to to Ford or anybody else. And yes, he made a number of mistakes that we could discuss. But however,